Welcome back, my fellow EDH and Magic the Gathering history nerds. This is Johnny Slivers, and we're doing episode 9 of the EDH Study Hall, brought to you by Cackling Carnarium. And today we are going to be picking up in limited edition beta, starting with Fire Elemental. And I'm going to see if I can do a little better, quicker assessment here and move on through things. So just to start off, we left off with Fire Breathing last week, or yesterday. With today, we're picking up with Fire Elemental. It is a 5/4 vanilla basic creature for 3 and 2 red. In terms of EDH, don't play it. It's just generic, and there are better things to do with that casting cost. Now, moving on to our next card, Flash Fires. Flash Fires is a sorcery for 3 and a red. All planes in play are destroyed, which can have relevance, but it's a little bit focused. So unless your meta is really, really loaded up with players who are, stuck on white mana, I'd pass. It's very kind of corner case, and you need to your meta would have to warrant it, and it's just not something to include, unless perhaps you're playing something that turns everything into planes. But I don't think that's a thing outside of Celestial Dawn, and that's only your stuff. All right, on to the next one. Flight. Is a 1 blue for an enchantment. Target creature is now a flying creature. Target creature gains flying. This is not the worst enchantment. It does give evasion, so could be relevant in like a Bant. It could have some home in possibly a Bant kind of aura, like aura deck. So sort of the I don't want to say Voltron. I don't know if I want to call it Voltron, but this is not usually the way to go. I wouldn't personally recommend it. It's gotten a lot of printings. It's very cheap. If you want to experiment with it, fine, but I think there are better enchantments to work with. After Flight, we have Fog. Now, Fog is... There's a strategy around Fogs. There's the Fog ability to prevent combat damage is relevant. It is 1 green for an instant. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. It can buy you a turn. It's kind of people kind of sneer at this card just because it feels like a cop-out in a lot of ways. Most people feel like this is also a wasted space in the deck. It's not gaining you board state. That's usually why people are not really into this. But that's fine. If you have a strategy that's working with this and fog abilities like Turbo Fog, I don't know if that's really something that you see in EDH, but there's a lot of these abilities that you can try and take advantage of that. So, it's not the worst thing to experiment with, but just keep in mind that Fog doesn't advance your board state, and that's the biggest hang up with that card. Forcefield, on the other hand, this one, I went to Scryfall to check this one out. Forcefield is 3 mana for an artifact. You pay 1. The next time target unblocked creature would deal combat damage to you this turn, prevent all but 1 of that damage. So if there is a big Anthem, if someone's going wide and they've got a lot of small creatures and they pull one of these Anthem effects where it's like Goblin Bushwhacker or something like Kadim the what is it? I'm blanking. It's the Boros Metalcraft commander from New Phyrexia. If they're buffing up their team and you have mana open, this can have relevance. It does require you to target, so if anything has hexproof or shroud, it does have that limitation, so you're not going to be able to get there with that. And it's up there. It's a pricey card for good reason too. It's a very rare edition. You're not going to find a lot of copies of it. It was only printed up through Unlimited, and after that was it. So there's a scarcity on it. I don't know if it's on reserve list, but it's a good card all around, and it's definitely worth playing. If you have access to it, I'd say play it, because it will stave off any of the aggro decks and kind of keep them in check. But otherwise, yeah, there are other ways to get similar effects, so to speak, that you don't need to spend hundreds of dollars to get them. But if you have the income or you have the access to the card, by all means, put that in an EDH deck. That's a good one. Force of Nature after Forcefield. Did I get that right? Force of Nature. Yeah. Force of Nature. Oh, I remember when this card was just the the new hotness. Back in 1994, Force of Nature is 2 and 4 green mana for an 8/8 with trample, which is pretty sweet. At the beginning of your upkeep, Force of Nature deals 8 damage to you unless you pay 4 green mana. Now, this is the thing here. Force of Nature, even though I'm going to keep saying if it has an upkeep, that drawback is a liability. Force of Nature used to have a lot of options in terms of either paying the mana with Llanowar Elves or a lot of mana dorks, or you could put lifelink on this, and even if it did the damage to you, you gain the life back. It didn't tap it down. It was still, the penalty wasn't so harsh that you couldn't work through it, but that upkeep is still it's a big drawback if you're going to keep paying that upkeep, unless you're ramping into enough mana to support it. But even then, for 6 mana, we've got, Terra Stomper, I think, is the other way to go. You go with Terra Stomper, you don't need Force of Nature. So this card was an old school big bad, but it just didn't age well. It didn't stand the test of time. See, Terra Stomper, better fixing here. So it's 3 and 3 generic and 3 green. It's an 8/8. Terra Stomper can't be countered and has trample. So, I mean, plain as day, you've got Terra Stomper will always be played over Force of Nature. Force of Nature is the original Force of Nature. The art is really cool looking, but this is not a reason to play it in EDH. So unless you're going for a very kind of thematic big beats kind of deck, I would avoid Force of Nature in EDH. All right, moving on from Force of Nature. Click, 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 click. Forests A, B, and C. If you can get your hands on any of these lands, oh man, I didn't realize I had crept up there. I think I've got one of these floating around somewhere. These are cool lands to get your hands on. They look great. The fact that the word they always spelled everything out. It was tap to add 1 green mana to your mana pool, and that was a really cool. It's just got a cool look to them. They're going to run you roughly 25 a piece, 20 to 25, depending on which one you're going for. This is Christopher Rush, some original Christopher Rush art. That's this is some fine work here. I mean, like, yeah, any of the basic lands from Beta and Unlimited, they are worth getting your hands on. Next up, we have Fork. Fork. Now, I'm gonna go into Scryfall and check the Oracle text on this. Fork had a functional reprint, but there's something different about it. And let's go. All right, so copy target instant or sorcery spell, except that copy is red. You may choose new targets for the copy. All right, so this is 2 red for an instant. Copy target instant or sorcery spell, right. Now, the difference is, let's go find Reverberate. I'll go side by side here. Because they brought a similar effect back in one of the core sets. And Reverberate was that card. Copy target instant or sorcery spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. So it's the same thing. I don't, for some reason they didn't, I don't know why they didn't want to reprint Fork, or there was something about it. It must have been, except that the copy is red. I don't know if changing something to a red spell made a difference. I'm not sure, but for some reason they didn't want to reprint Fork. Revised edition pushing up upwards of $20 when you can actually, I mean, if you want Fork for the old school kind of feel to it, I suppose you can get it, but you get the same effect off of something like Reverberate. So I would go budget with Reverberate first, but the Fork is, that's the original split spell where you kind of can copy a spell that's in play. And I remember when I loved trying to make this card work. It was such a big deal if someone played Fork and you like doubled something. But in EDH, there are some spells matter decks like the instant and sorcery prowess kind of decks that really would like to lean on something like this. And with the new, I think with the new commander decks coming out, the Jeskai, the flashback deck, this could find some more relevance. It might be worth checking into. So getting copies of Reverberate and this, you can multi up your spells a bit more. And again, this will also, you feel like a broken record here, is something that fits on Isochron Scepter. Isochron Scepter, just be warned. Just whenever I talk about this, just know that I understand it is a 2-for-1, that it is a liability and it is a risk. But it's always like nice to get a repeatable ability put on an artifact. Anyway, I will try and refrain from that. We'll get back to the task at hand. Frozen Shade. Frozen Shade was printed up through 5th edition. It started in alpha, and it's 3 and a black for a 0/1 with the ability of pay 1 black. It gains +1/+1. Frozen Shade had functional reprints brought in from throughout the years, and it was there's lots of shades all over the history of Magic. They probably saw no reason to keep reprinting this when they could print new versions. This was always deceiving for me. The artwork always led me to believe it was flying, but it's like, reading the card explains the card. There is no flying ability on this card. So Frozen Shade is for 3 mana as an 0/1. Yeah, you can pump it, but this isn't worth dropping into an EDH deck personally. So yeah, I would say avoid. Fungus Or, on the other hand, this one got changed. They changed it up. It is now technically a dinosaur. I think they've eroded that. And Fungus Or is the original. Fungus Or. There we go. So Fungus Or is now classified as a fungus dinosaur thanks to Ixalan. Whenever Fungus Or is dealt damage, put a +1/+1 counter on it. One of the an old combo you could do with Fungus Or was on turn 3 or 2, you play your Prodigal Sorcerer, and then the next turn you play Fungus Or, and you turn them into a 3/3 and just keep pinging them and making them a bigger dinosaur, and just gobbles up the field. It does have a home in certain decks. It would be relevant in like Gave, Guru of Spores kind of decks, anything that's playing around with +1/+1 counters. This guy's worth it. This is actually a good one to keep in mind. Or if you've got the ability to give it Undying, perhaps that also gives it a little more bite. I think it's on theme for like either a dinosaur deck or a counters deck. It is not just an auto include in any green deck, so buyer beware on that one. The old school art is pretty funky looking. That's a pretty sweet card. But altogether, it's kind of like buyer beware. Just don't throw it into anything. But if you've got a strategy that can take advantage of the counters and get counters put onto it, then it is something worth considering. But I don't even believe it's got a whole bunch of play. Let's see. Here we go. Fungus Or, 179 decks. Still, again, probably one of those like flavor style cards that got thrown into a couple lists. But yeah, there it is. Fungus Or. I like it, but there's probably better options. Gaia's Leash. Gaia's Leash got printed up through 4th edition and into Time Spiral. And Gaia's Liege is one of these. It's 3 and 3 green for an creature avatar. Gaia's Liege power and toughness are each equal to the number of force you control. As long as Gaia's Liege is attacking, its power and toughness are each equal to the number of force defending player controls instead. So target land becomes a force until Gaia Liege leaves play. So the thing, you can start nerfing your opponent's mana base. This is interesting. So it goes in a ramp deck. You could use it to start bottlenecking your opponent's ability to cast the colors of mana that they need. So if somebody's like stuck on a certain set of colors and they can't get that one land that they need, and they finally get it, and you can turn something into a forest, there it is. Or you can take if you can take man lands and turn those into forests, you can just turn them into a forest to end the turn. Let's see if now they haven't printed it since Time Spiral, so let's check in with Scryfall and make sure we're not missing some update in the actual wording, because that will make a difference. Gaia's Liege. All right, target land becomes a forest until Gaia Elite. Okay, so it doesn't say basic forest. I'd have to do a little more homework to find out exactly what's going on. If like, if it would turn something like Mazavith into a forest and Mazavith, or to just remove the fact that no, I'm wondering if it like takes Mazavith and just turns it into a basic forest and it can't be Mazavith anymore. That's what I'm curious about. I don't see it right here, and I got Undying MTG in the chat. Maybe he can help me out. And let's see. So I think this, if you've got a mono green ramp deck, if you've got an elf deck and you want to do something where you're playing funky shenanigans with Forest Walk, this might be neat flavor. I don't know if it's worth it though. It's not going to be splashed into a multicolored deck. It's relying on you having Forest just to be alive. And if it's attacking, then you got to count on your opponent having Forest. You're not attacking with this card. You're just trying to nerf their mana base, personally. How you doing, Eric? Let's see. Expand this window here so I can actually read the chat. The exact wording, you're talking about exact wording on Gaia's Leash? Exact wording for Gaia's Leash would be, as long as Gaia's Leash isn't attacking, its power and toughness are each equal to the number of forests you control. As long as Gaia's Leash is attacking, its power and toughness is each equal to the number of forests defending player controls. You tap, target land becomes a forest until Gaia's Leash leaves the battlefield. So, yeah, I'm not sure if it's like, what is that, like Tomb of Yogg? Is that, yeah, so that does it. It definitely turns it into, takes the land, turns it into just a basic forest. They probably just haven't had any reason to actually go looking at this card to update and say basic forest, but I imagine that would help clear things up. But it's a good question to ask about. But that's, yeah, I think if you're looking to nerf mana bases, this could be fun, just to bottleneck your opponent. It's like interesting control component for green, but you got to have that ramp. That's a big steep casting cost to like try and get that ability and do something to mess with their mana base, when you have better things to do like Blood Moon or Back to Basics. Going into, oh yeah, here we go. Gauntlet of Might. Never saw it printing past unlimited. It is 4 mana for an artifact, and all red creatures gain +1/+1, and all mountains provide an extra red mana when tapped. So this buffed the team, this ramped your mana, this was everything red needed to be an awesome monocolored deck that could be just busted, and then they decided they didn't want to print this card anymore. And I'm a bit surprised that it doesn't cost more. This always has such mystique to it. I always felt like this was one of those cards that would have been breaking $1,000, but it is not. This is available. You can get this for under $700 from the unlimited set. Not that, and for under $200 from the collector's edition. I wouldn't. International edition, that might be a way to go. Oh, it's a gold border, that's why. Okay. So yeah, in EDH, like this is where EDH, there are some circles where you can definitely get away with running the non-official cards, and some groups are okay with that. If you're playing competitive in any way, you can't really get away with that. But Gauntlet of Might is a sweet, sweet card. If you ever get a chance to use it, that's go for it. But again, this is one of those cards that starts tipping the scales on that price point, where be cautious about what you put in your deck, because when the value of your deck starts equaling the down payment on a luxury SUV, then you're running some real risk of losing value in your collection if somebody decides to just walk away. Just basic force. Yeah, I think as far as Gaia's Leash went, I don't think they actually have gone back to look at that text and review it, just because I don't think it sees a lot of play. Giant Growth, a basic combat trick. It's a green instant for 1 green. Target creature gains +3/+3 until end of turn. If you're an aggro, this can be a fun little like shenanigans thing. I usually personally like the Anthem effects, where you're already just having a static ability build up your creatures. Next up, we have Giant Spider. This is 3 and a green for a 2/4 giant summon spider. Does not fly, but can block creatures with flying. aka Reach. This has seen many, many, many printings throughout the history of the game. It was there in the beginning. It has come back in multiple core sets. It's back in core 2019. So yeah, Giant Spider and other iterations of it do exist. It does have relevance in decks like Doran the Siege Tower, although when you're going that route, usually Doran and Arcades the strategists are going to count on creatures that have a little more ability to them. I mean, this is kind of vanilla Reach. There are bigger, better versions, or there are other versions of this kind of ability and this effect and this creature that have more options to them. So, if you need it as a filler, that's fine. If you want the old school art, that flavor, that's pretty cool. But it's very strategy specific. So just don't go throwing it in anything unless you're short up on whatever. Urza's Glasses, on the other hand, I wish they had printed this a few more times. It's not an expensive card. It's one for an artifact, and it's a mono artifact, but we'll go to the revised version. It'll have the correct tap. You may look at opponent's hand. This is a good info seeking kind of card. This one is actually, I would say it's definitely worth having one of these in the deck if you are counting, like if you're doing a heavy combo deck and you need to know if you don't need to play through Storm of Counterspells. This is not bad. They're probably, if you're trying to fine tune your strategy and run something a little more competitive and get the job done more efficiently, then this may be wasting your time when you can collect information in other ways. But if you just want to have the option of like knowing what's in somebody's hand at a moment's notice, this isn't a bad artifact. I'd say throw it into the deck, but I think if you're going to make any cuts, it'll probably be one of the first things you do cut. Let's go ahead and what do we got? We'll end on a classic. All right, so next up is Gloom. This is another one of those nerf the opposing color enchantments. It's 2 and a black for an enchantment. White spells cost 3 more mana to cast. Circles of protection cost. This is before. Circles is just the circles of protection. And then they needed to clarify that as they got into the later versions. Activated abilities of white enchantments cost an additional 3. So they cleaned that up because eventually they made white enchantments that had activated abilities. If your meta is heavy with white spells and white commanders, maybe this is worth it. But outside of that, I think there are better things to do with that mana. Goblin Balloon Brigade. It is the original Flying Goblins. It's 1 red for a 1/1 goblin, and you pay 1 goblins gain. The wording is just the worst. Goblin Balloon Brigade gains flying until end of turn. So it's just a flying goblin that hurls themselves through the air, and it's like whatever. Sure, I guess you could throw it in a goblin deck, as opposed to Goblin King, which is totally worth putting in a goblin deck. If you're running Krenko, you put all your lords in there. It's 1 and 2 red for a creature lord. Do we have anything newer than that? I'd like to see if was that 8th edition, 10th edition. It's just goblin. They don't call it a lord anymore. Other goblin control get +1/+1 and have Mountain Walk. So if by chance you're playing Blood Moon in EDH and you're playing a goblin deck, this gives all your critters the Mountain Walks, and that's pretty sweet. The original Goblin Lord, there's multiple other versions of this card that do give him a little extra in some other department. Goblin Chieftain, I think, is probably the better of the bunch, but the Goblin King, he was the OG. Granite Gargoyle, one of the few red cards that has what we would call in the business butt breathing. So it never got past revised. It was 2 and a red, or for a 2/2 with flying, and it had pay 1 red, and the gargoyle gets and it gets +0/+1. So nope. Better things to do in red with that mana, and especially when it's just trying to keep itself alive for the 2 power. This was not worth it. And we'll end. Yep, we're going to end on one of the OG duds, the Gray Ogre. Gray Ogre is 2 and a red for a 2/2 vanilla creature. And the joke from the days of yesteryear was people playing on the playground when then they play their Black Lotus and grind it into the pavement, and then drop a Grey Ogre, because that was the OG power play. This is before people figured out Channel Fireball. So yeah, this is hot garbage. Do not play Grey Ogre. Don't do it. It's not worth it. This is vanilla crap. So, yep, that's it. We're gonna end on that note. Yeah, no, we're not gonna. I'm not gonna recommend this card for anybody in EDH. This doesn't have the power. I'm gonna say it's played in 0. Grey Ogre played in 0 decks, and if it shows up, God help us. We're gonna look this up. We're gonna look it up. Grey Ogre. It's not. Is it not even? Not even there. What's happening? Grey Ogre. I was misspelling it. Shame on me. What? This showed up in 12 lists. This showed up in any EDH list at all. Are you kidding me? Oh my god. Friends, don't let friends play Grey Ogre. I'm sorry. Just don't do it. Just please do us all a favor. Oh my god. I can't believe I looked up that stat. So there it is. That is episode 9 of the EDH Study Hall. Thank you for joining me. This is Johnny Slivers signing off here at the Cackling Carnarium. If you have any questions, please hit me up on Twitter at Johnny Slivers. You can also drop comments in the section down below the video. And please like, subscribe, share with your friends, let them know. And so I will be this is just the process. We're pointing my eyeballs at all the magic cards and starting at the beginning. So what a ride. Okay. Until next time, have a great day, and may your top decks be epic.